Welcome into the RotoWire Sports Gambling Podcast, a subsidiary of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Of course, that's where you're listening to us on your podcast feed of choice. I am Nick Whalen, joined as I will be every week again this season by my good pal, John McKechnie. John, you and I talked about my Circa Million entry. You can find that archived on the RotoWire YouTube channel. You can find it on all the RotoWire social channels. So we've already dipped our toes in a little bit to the week one board. We've talked about 3 or 4 games that we're aligned on, but we got a lot more time here. I mean, that video was only like 20 minutes. I mean, we got a full hour to dive in on everything week one. We are recording, full disclosure, late afternoon on Thursday. So we're not going to talk a whole lot of Chiefs-Lions. As of recording, doesn't sound like Travis Kelce is going to play in that game, but we'll hit both of those teams next week when we preview week 2. Jonathan, we did our futures episode this time last week. I want to reiterate how great it is to be back in the saddle with you. This is the highlight of my week during the NFL season. And look, you love football as much as I do. There's a lot of highlights going on throughout our weeks at RotoWire, but this hour will always hold a place in my heart.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, for better or for worse, the higher ups have decided to give us a platform for an hour to just shoot the crap, talking football, talking about our bets. Making fun of each other for the previous week's best bets that did not come in, all that good stuff. It's the best. I definitely have a blast. Definite highlight every single week during the football season because, no one's going to feel bad for us that our job is to talk about football, but it's grind this time of year. There's a lot of things in the air, a lot of things that you and I both need to take care of. But for this hour, we're just shooting takes, baby. It's great.
Yep. Shooting the crap. I think that's the best way to sum up this podcast. But yeah, for the next hour, we got blinders on. It's all pigskin all the time. Let's get into some of the games that, again, we know we're aligned on, and we'll try to hit on all 16, or I guess all 15 non-Thursday night games and give at least a take on each of those. We'll go deeper on some than others. I want to start, I promise there's no bias here, with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Do some line shopping here because, I love the Jags at -5 on the road at Indianapolis. You'll see that line at the DraftKings Sportsbook, for example, but in the Circa Million contest over at FanDuel right now, that number sits at 4.5. We know that Trevor Lawrence has never won a road game at Indy. He's only had 2 tries, and he was coached by Urban Meyer for one of them, so I'm throwing that out. We also know that the Colts, John, are 113-1 ATS in week 1 over the last 15 years. So, that spans all the gamut of quarterbacks that they've thrown out the last few years. Curtis Painter is included in that. Peyton Manning is included in that. This is a team that has tended to start slow. And look, no team has had more chaos this offseason, especially over the last month, than the Indianapolis Colts. No other team in the NFL had its owner come out and say, hey, you could die and the league would move on. We don't even care. No other team is dealing with that, man. And on top of all that, I think this is probably a bottom 5 roster in the NFL, just in terms of talent, especially at key positions. You got a rookie quarterback. And then on the other side, I have big time questions about this Jacksonville defense. I am very interested to see how that defense holds up against the Kansas City Chiefs next week. I don't know if that's going to be a problem this week, though. I think the Colts are a perfect opponent to kind of soft launch the 2023 Jaguars defense against. And I think this Jags offense has a chance to really go off in the dome.
So this is a particularly interesting one because I feel like this game in particular, and it seems like we're treated to a lot of Jacksonville versus Indianapolis early in the season or week 1 a lot of the time. I feel like it was either last year or 2 years ago that there was like a huge upset, although important context, Indianapolis never wins in Jacksonville. This game is in Indianapolis, so you can kind of write off, at least I think, the bizarro outcomes in this one. I think this one, despite the weirdness that tends to surround this particular rivalry, I think we're looking at a really great opportunity to back the Jags here. I think Indianapolis, under too much turmoil, it would take really a Herculean effort from Anthony Richardson. I believe in Richardson long term, but asking him week 1 to defeat a team like the Jaguars that was a scrappy team that made it all the way to the AFC divisional round last year, it's a bridge too far. I feel like the Jaguars edition of Calvin Ridley is really going to be something that takes that offense to another level. And we'll see if the offensive line is, making important strides forward. Like you said, the defense, a work in progress, but that might not really become an issue until after this week. So for me, like you said, I think it's really smart to shop lines here because there is a decent amount of variance. I mean, even at PointsBet, if you like Indianapolis, they're offering that at plus 5.5. So they're right. So there seems to be some serious discrepancies between the books here. But yeah, if you're on the Jags, look for a book where they're still available at 4.5 because I think that they cruise past this regardless. But obviously, you want to lessen that margin for error.
Yeah, a lot of money already in on the Jaguars. That they have roughly 85% of the bets in on Jacksonville to cover that 5-point spread. That's via the DraftKings Sportsbook, and even more money, John, on the under 46.5 here. And again, you're going to look around at that number. You might find a point or two in either direction. I think I like the under here as well. I think Jacksonville, if things break right here for this offense, and I think they want to make a statement, right? I think they want a big kind of reintroduction of Calvin Ridley to the NFL. I think they're going to make a point to get him involved. And, I think the general hierarchy in the Jags offense makes a lot more sense now. You're not asking Christian Kirk to play up as a wide receiver 1. He slides back into his more natural role as a wide receiver 2. Zay Jones, more natural at a wide receiver 3. I do worry about what this does for Evan Ingram in fantasy, kind of being knocked down the pecking order pretty significantly with the addition of Ridley. But, I think, if Jacksonville could put up 30, 34 points in this game, I just, there's a certain Anthony Richardson, we don't know what it's going to be factor here. And again, I don't love the Jags defense, but I think I would lean under 46.5 because I don't trust the Colts to pull their weight.
Right. So I could see this being 31-14 Jags, and the under is still the right side here. So, I think bottom line here, the important detail is Indianapolis's offense not being able to generate enough points to kind of push this to the over. So at 46.5, definitely on the under here as well. This should be fairly one-sided in favor of Jacksonville.
So I mentioned we're doing Circa Million this year. Really excited to get into that contest. You're going to be giving me a significant amount of help, John, with those picks throughout the year. We got a message from our friends at Circa to pass along. It is football season at Circa Resort and Casino out in Las Vegas, featuring the best pool in history. It's called Stadium Swim. John, you and I have been there a number of times. I can corroborate it is the best pool in history.
Big facts.
We're talking 3 levels, 6 pools, and 143-foot diagonal screen. It's massive. It's a little overwhelming at times. There's a ton of games going on at once, but Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. It's my favorite place to watch football. They play every game, college, pros. You'll even get some baseball mixed in there through November. You can catch all the action poolside from a variety of seating options, including cozy day beds to private temperature-controlled cabanas. Stadium Swim, it's located at Circa Resort and Casino. It's open 365 days a year, all sports, all seasons. You can book today at circalasvegas.com. That's circalasvegas.com. Let's move on, John, to a game and a line that I've increasingly liked more and more as the week has gone along, due in part to a player on the other side of the line being ruled out. And that, of course, is Cooper Kupp. Seattle sitting as a 5.5-point favorite over the LA Rams. That number actually you could find as low as 4 at FanDuel. It's actually down to 5 now at DraftKings. Been on the move a little bit over the last couple of hours here. What explains that line movement to you? When we talked 4 hours ago, it was 5.5.
Right. So that one is not making a ton of sense to me. I mean, that must be some sort of market correction because as far as we know, Seattle should be pretty much at full strength here. So you would have expected, especially with the Cooper Kupp news coming earlier this week, that if anything, this line was going to move a little bit closer towards Seattle -6, -6.5, something along those lines. So for this movement, that is a bit confusing, if anything, when it comes to breaking this game down. But I'm standing strong, standing steady when it comes to backing Seattle here. I just feel like the Rams, it might be understated just how bad they're going to be this season. And I think a week 1 game in Seattle, noisy environment, the fans are juiced once again. now that they have a competitive product on the field. I really have a hard time seeing Los Angeles staying competitive here.
I do as well. And again, I'm confused by that line movement as you are. I think the Cooper Kupp absence, my guess is that the bookmakers probably had that factored in, for the last couple of weeks as this line sat at 5.5, but still strange. I struggle to find a case, why anybody is betting the Rams right now or putting enough money coming in on the Rams to really shift that line. I think the one thing I guess that you could give in favor of the Rams is they do have Sean McVay. He still somewhat carries that mystique. I just don't think this is a good roster, man. This is a team that went all in. They got their Super Bowl. It was worth it, no question. But even at the time, when they made the trade for Jalen Ramsey and they made the Odell Beckham trade, you're thinking, well, at some point you're going to have to pay the piper here. And it kind of feels like that's happened already. I mean, even if Cooper Kupp was playing in this game, I'd be very comfortable taking Seattle at 4. I wouldn't be as comfortable, but you take him out and there's just no obvious pivot for Matthew Stafford in this offense. And by the way, we have not seen Matthew Stafford since week 11 of last season. So I don't know that it's a given that Matthew Stafford is all of a sudden back to being the guy that he was 2 years ago when he led this team to a Super Bowl. So yeah,
right.
I have a lot of questions about the Rams offense. I have even more questions about their defense. I think this is a great spot for Seattle at home.
Yeah, I think bottom line here with the Rams is, they're coming off the weakest title defense in history, basically. Just non-competitive for the bulk of last season. It started week 1 against Buffalo, and it just snowballed from there. Kupp getting hurt, Matthew Stafford getting hurt, and so on. And because of that pushing the chips to the middle of the table dynamic, in the Rams just kind of deciding, we're not going to draft players. We're just going to trade our draft picks for established players. That's well and good. And it obviously worked for them in the 2021 season. But like you said, we pay the piper on the back end. They were not able to restock that roster really whatsoever this offseason. So, I mean, I think we're looking at a team that is more likely to challenge for the number 1 overall pick in the coming draft this year than anything resembling a competitive team. So Seattle, I think, takes advantage of that. I think that there just simply isn't enough on this Rams roster, even if they are well coached, to really hang with a team like Seattle at this juncture.
Yeah, I mean, McVay has just kind of owned Pete Carroll, 9-4, ATS. He's won 5 straight against the spread against Pete Carroll, but Seattle's covered 3 straight openers as well. And again, Seattle getting this game at home pushes it over the top for me. Let's go to Atlanta, Carolina. Again, we'll bounce around a little bit here, and then we'll make sure we talk about all 15 non-Thursday night games on the slate. Atlanta sitting at 3.5. That's the number. It's been pretty steady, right? You're not seeing a ton of line movement there. That's the number at DraftKings. That's the number at FanDuel. That's the number at BetMGM and PointsBet. You can compare all these odds, by the way, over at RotoWire.com. If you go to our NFL betting section, there's a great page that allows you to kind of see where all the sports books are at, find the best line for every game, whether you're looking at the money line, the spread, the total, even player props. So I recommend you checking that out. It's a tool we use all the time. 3.5 is not an ideal number for me, but I really like this Falcons team early on. I think they have a nice runway to start this season. Like at worst 4-3. I think they can go 5-2 over their first 7 games. Really soft schedule throughout the year, but especially early. And it starts with this game, and I understand if you have questions about Desmond Ridder. I still have questions about him myself. He has never played an actual snap with Kyle Pitts, who was out at the end of last season. So, I'm not making the case here that the Falcons are just going to roll through, unabated against the Carolina Panthers. But for me, this is a really, really tough spot for Bryce Young to have to come in and make his first NFL start on the road against a defense that should be better and against the Falcons offense that, to me, isn't going to ask Desmond Ridder to do too much. You just need Desmond Ridder to not turn the ball over, make the right throws, make the right plays, and more than anything, just hand the ball off to Bijan Robinson, hand the ball off to Tyler Algier. I think the Falcons can kind of dominate the flow of this game on the ground.
Well, I have a sneaking suspicion that you must host an NFL-centric radio show for 8 hours a week, because that's the kind of take craftsmanship that can only be born out of that level of preparation when you're talking about the early part of this Falcons schedule, baby. That's where we want to hammer it. And like you said, it starts this Sunday, home game against a divisional opponent, rolling out a rookie starter, a kind of not super inspiring group of skill position guys around him. The offensive line is young. I think it will gel in time, but I think for this particular setup, it's going to be tough for them to move the ball. I have my lingering skepticism on Bryce Young to begin with, as far as his transition to this level. And the Falcons, they can just play bully ball. Well, I think, you add Bijan Robinson to a run game that was already extremely effective. I think that offensive line is considered one of the better ones in football. And I think that's going to help kind of carry them over the course of this season. I liked what they did in free agency as well. So this all sets up really nicely for the Falcons. It can be tricky to trust the Falcons with more than a field goal. And I definitely understand that. And I had some reservations about it last night when we were talking about it. But as we've talked it out a little bit more, the more I come down on the side of the Falcons, getting it done here, covering that 3.5 and maybe even looking more like a touchdown here.
Yeah, number one overall picks, making their first career start in week 1. They are 7-19 ATS since, I don't know, how many years is that? 22 years. Actually, I don't even know. I'm so bad at math trying to do these things mentally on the fly. Either way, 7-19 is the number over the last 26 starts made by a number one overall pick in his first career start. Those players are 1-13 ATS since 2002, John. Not since David Carr for the Houston Texans back in 2002 has a number one overall pick quarterback covered in his first start. They're 0-13-1 straight up since 2002. So not a lot of metrics pointing you in favor of Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. And Frank Reich, everywhere he's gone, he's gotten off to slow starts. 0-4-1 ATS and straight up in week 1 as a head coach. Now, on the other side of this, Atlanta has not won in week 1 since 2017. So something has to give here, but I really like the Falcons to control this game. And again, not ask too much of Desmond Ridder. Let's go to your team. We've already talked about my Jags. You are a Baltimore Ravens fan. Baltimore gets a gift here, John, in week 1, especially, new faces in this offense, new offensive coordinator in Todd Monken. I think this is basically one of like the 3 teams in the NFL that you'd want to play at home in week 1, and they get the Texans. That number's moved around a little bit. I've seen some 9.5s around some shops here, but the line has basically been 10 all week. That's what it is at FanDuel, but again, down to 9.5 at DraftKings.
It is, and a lot of the money on the spread for this game in particular is actually coming in on the Texans. It looks like 70% of the handle at DraftKings Sportsbook is actually coming in on Houston. I think that speaks to this being the biggest number on the board. I think you have some great stats to give the listeners as far as double-digit favorites playing in week 1 and their cover rate. It's a little spoiler alert. It's not awesome. But I think at the same time, other than the Raiders game in the 2021 season, the Ravens under Harbaugh have been nails in week 1 for the most part. So I feel like them being at home, playing against, what is obviously one of the worst teams in football that is going to be down 3 of its, projected starting offensive linemen, that really hurts. You have a guy in CJ Stroud who, I think the biggest question about him is his ability to play in adverse setups, because everything at Ohio State was on easy mode. He's playing with receivers that were ready to play on Sundays on Saturday. He had an all-world offensive line to work with, and an offense that's definitely geared to be extremely quarterback friendly. There's no bigger turnaround or shift than playing quarterback for the Houston Texans after that. So Bryce Young is going to be dealing with something similar in Houston in Carolina, and CJ Stroud, I think, is going to have kind of a rude awakening here, or rude introduction to the NFL here on Sunday. So I think all of that combined with the concerns on the Texans side, I think the Ravens, I think that their move from Greg Roman to Todd Monken is going to prove to be one of the more significant coaching personnel moves of this entire NFL offseason. All of a sudden, that an offense that was bereft of talent and imagination last year has both of them now. And we can't always count on a new offense clicking right away, but I don't know. They've had all off season to prepare for this particular game too. And I think I think the Ravens want to show, proof of concept that Monken and the new receivers, it's going to work and it's going to look different in Baltimore this year.
I think Baltimore just has a really wide margin for error in this game. Like, even if it doesn't look great, even if it's a little clunky at first, even if there's a bit of an adjustment period, like I don't think you feel that same sense of urgency. If you're matching up against the Cincinnati Bengals in week 1, in division, I think Baltimore's going to have a runway here to kind of experiment early in this game, see what works, see what doesn't. And look, I mean, 9.5, 10, it's a big number for sure. And, I do in fact have some numbers to throw at you here. We're not even talking double-digit underdogs, just underdogs of 8 points or more in the last 20 years are 25-9 ATS. That's a 74% cover rate in week 1. So, historically, teams like Houston do find ways to keep these games relatively close. But, I think, to me, you could talk me into Baltimore, especially at 9.5. I think it's very easy to see this being a 10-plus point game. I like it more at 9.5 than I do 10, believe it or not. I like Baltimore even more as a survivor team. We'll talk about them later in the show when we do our weekly survivor preview. Week 1 double-digit favorites, by the way, 25-5 straight up in the last 20 years. So that's a great indication for Baltimore. And the Ravens are 11-4 ATS in week 1 under Jim Harbaugh. So historically, this team, regardless of what the changes have been, regardless of who the quarterback is, they found ways to start fast. So I like that one as well. Where do we want to go next year? Now, the board is our friend here, John. Let's just go to the next one listed chronologically here on RotoWire.com. Okay. Bengals-Browns, a hell of a matchup here. Number is sitting at 2.5 across the board. Minus 135 is the money line on the Bengals if you want that. Plus 120 for the Browns. Total up at 47.5. This feels like kind of a redux to me. We're going down this road again with the Cincinnati Bengals. They are the better team. They are the team that I think represents the AFC in the Super Bowl. But for the second straight year, we have Joe Burrow limited at the end of camp. Last year was the appendix. This year it's the calf. There's concerns that I don't think it turns into the disaster that week 1 was last year when Burrow threw 4 picks, lost a fumble, was sacked 7 times. And Cincinnati, to me, still should have won that game in regulation. If Evan McPherson makes a field goal, they somehow escaped that game. They ended up losing in overtime to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I think the 49ers going down to the Steelers and the Bengals going down to the Browns, those to me have been the 2 trendiest upset picks that I'm seeing this week.
Yeah, those definitely are. And I think that there's good cases to be made on either side when it comes to those 2 games in particular. And when it comes to this one, the big question that I think is going to be overarching in the NFL this year generally is which Deshaun Watson are we going to see? And if he looks anything like the Houston Deshaun Watson as opposed to, the last 6 weeks of last season, then the Browns are absolutely a dangerous team, and they're going to be at home against a divisional rival in this one. This could be pretty dicey for the Bengals, and the Bengals coming off their second straight, tough postseason loss. Do they kind of wear those scars a little bit into the first week or 2 of the season? And I think that they absolutely could. And I think a Browns group of skill position players that is extremely impressive, probably not on the same par as what the Bengals are cooking with, of course, but I still think that, the combination of Amari Cooper, David Njoku, who showed a lot last year, adding Elijah Moore, you have Nick Chubb in the peak of his prime, in my opinion.
Peak Chubb.
Yeah, I'm ready for it, man. I have so much Chubb in my fantasy and best ball portfolio this year. I'm in big trouble if he misses any time. But besides the point here, I think that the Bengals, I don't like them to cover this one. I know 2.5 is an alluring one because, a field goal gets you where you need to be, but I'm going to side with the home dogs here. I'm going to go with the dog pound. I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns to cover this one.
This is probably a stay away for me. I'm not going to bet it. I don't think I'm going to include it in my Circa Million entry, which, by the way, thank you to Circa for giving me this very cool Circa Million hat.
Look at that.
It does not fit my below average size head, but nonetheless, it will be displayed in my office throughout the season. The fact that Cincinnati was in this situation last year, that's what's preventing me from fully trusting the Browns. And I went with Cleveland in our staff picks. And I just didn't feel great about it because I feel like the Bengals, they're going to be aware, right? I think that if we're talking about it, they know it internally. They're going to be saying, look, we know what happened last year. We can't start as cold as we did last season and expect to just battle our way back and win 8 or 9 in a row, whatever it was. I think they're going to be aware, and I think they're going to do everything they can to prevent that disaster. And look, again, they almost beat the Steelers last year in what was a disaster game for Joe Burrow in just about every element. And that's the thing with the Bengals. It's like, they could be down 14-3 at halftime, and they're just never out of any game. So I respect your take on the Browns. It's like a 51-49 game for me. I lean Cleveland as well, but I don't like this one bit. Let's go to Tampa Bay and Minnesota. This is a line that's also been on the move. It's been sitting Minnesota -6 for most of the week. Now you're seeing it at Vikings -5.5 across the board. Are we undervaluing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
I honestly think we might be, okay. which is crazy to say. I don't think the Buccaneers are going to be a good team at all this year. I think that they're probably my pick to be last place in the NFC South. However, when it comes to betting, the lines are set. So, it really does become that 50-50 type of proposition. And I think one of the big recurring themes from our show last year was just not really trusting the Vikings. Like, they would win every week, but you would not be convinced whatsoever by whatever they put out there on the previous Sunday. And I'm not sure that goes away. And if anything, we might see some regression from the Vikings. I mean, a team with as low of a points differential versus the record that they had last year, it stands to reason that they are going to, A, be in a lot of close games once again, and B, not have that same success rate in those one-score games. So as uninspiring as it is to back Baker Mayfield as a retread, and you have an offensive line that's in a little bit of trouble here, and you have a backfield that no one's really sold on. Things looked really stale last year post Tom Brady. I still think they have a good enough defense to gunk things up just a little bit, and it's really, when it comes down to it, I still need some convincing to trust the Vikings. So when it's something like a 6-point line or 5.5, I feel like the Buccaneers can find their way into covering here.
Todd Bowles, 18-27-3 ATS as a dog in his coaching career. Baker is one of the worst ATS QBs in the last couple of decades. I mean, that's where I struggle here, right? Like, I don't love the coaching in Tampa Bay. I certainly don't love the quarterback, but I do think the rest of this roster is a lot better than we're giving it credit for, right? I think everybody kind of wants to toss the Buccaneers into the same bucket as like the Colts and the Texans and the Cardinals, maybe even the Rams. And I think there's just a lot more talent on this roster than there is on those other teams that are kind of vying for bottom 5 position. And look, I mean, Tampa Bay was a team that was contending for Super Bowls, as recently as last year. They were a playoff team, and they never really woke up, including that playoff loss to Dallas. But I don't think this is a roster that sees itself as like a 4-win team, which a lot of people I've kind of talked about it as. So yeah, this is a tough one for me. I would lean Minnesota. I really would. I know everybody thinks Minnesota is going to regress, and I do as well. They were a 13-win team. They went 11-0 in one-score games. Like, there's no way in HE double hockey sticks, John, that's happening again. But I think you could say, all right, maybe they win 3 fewer games, and they're still a 10-win team, and they're still maybe winning the NFC South. So they have the advantage at quarterback. They have the single best player on the field in Justin Jefferson, and they're at home in this game. So I don't really have a problem taking Minnesota here. I wouldn't say I love it, but I can't back Baker Mayfield in week 1. I can't do it. Let's move on. Or go ahead.
But bottom line here for me, you're not going to find a lot out there that supports taking the Buccaneers here, but weird stuff happens in week 1. And so I'm going to lean into that.
That's the ultimate counterpoint. Weird stuff does happen. Upsets are going to happen. This could be one of them. Let's go to Titans Saints. This is one of the most evenly matched games on the slate. This is one that I will be staying far away from in Circa Million. Saints, 3-point favorites. That's been the line for a while now. No real movement there. Just kind of getting the standard 3 at home. I get it. I think these teams are, again, very, very evenly matched. I think Tennessee, when at full strength, is another team that to me is pretty underrated. Now, over the course of 18 games, can all of Derrick Henry, Treylon Burks, DeAndre Hopkins, Ryan Tannehill, Chigga Conquo, can they all stay healthy? Probably not. If any one of those guys goes down, especially Derrick Henry or especially Ryan Tannehill, this team could sink very, very quickly. But I think everybody's jumping off Tennessee a little bit too early here. I think they will challenge the Jaguars, who have a very difficult schedule in the AFC South. And, we always talk about, coaches like Mike Tomlin and Bill Belichick, like you don't want to bet against them, especially if they're an underdog. I mean, Mike Vrabel kind of deserves a seat in that conversation as well.
Yes, he does. He's going to have his guys ready to play. I don't think that the Superdome mystique is quite what it was as far as that home field advantage for the Saints is concerned. And on one side of the coin, we love backing a team that is coached by Mike Vrabel because that the effort and the intensity and just the sheer uncomfortableness that they introduce to their opponents is something that's worthwhile. I also love betting against Dennis Allen. Like, I don't think he's a good coach whatsoever. This is, talking point Z on this, but, Alvin Kamara is out and there's no real backfield depth with Kendre Miller being dinged up. So all of a sudden we're like really, really counting on Derek Carr to kind of save the day in his Saints debut. It's interesting to me that the action is a little bit lopsided on this one. We're looking at 71% of the money coming in on Tennessee to cover the spread of 3. So that's, and that is interesting when you can compare it to the fact that of the tickets, it's basically even. So what I'm saying there is that almost the same amount of people have bet on the Saints as they have the Texans, but monetarily speaking, it's very lopsided in the side of Tennessee. So someone who owns a business in Nashville must have plunked down a pretty penny for this one to kind of sway it to that extent.
One little prop bet angle that I like here, Jamal Williams is plus 150 to score at any time in this game. You get that at BetMGM. He's at plus money at DraftKings as well. May I remind you, he had 18 touchdowns last year, essentially as a backup running back. And he's the clear starter for these first 3 weeks. So, I don't see this being a high-scoring game. I mean, the total's at 41 for a reason. You can see both of these teams, ending up under 20. Like, this could very easily be like a 19-17 game either way. But I like Jamal Williams at plus money to find his way into the end zone here. Any other thoughts? Any other angles on this one?
Not especially. I think something that's going to be a key takeaway here is the Tennessee offensive line, because in the preseason, it looked like it had the potential to be historically bad. I mean, the Bears, again, early preseason at that, they were just in Tennessee's backfield constantly. You wonder if the Saints with Cam Jordan and company, are they going to be able to heat up Ryan Tannehill, pretty much every time he drops back? I think that's going to be a key here. But bottom line, I'm siding with Tennessee. I wish I was getting the hook on the other end of it, but what can you do? I'm still gonna go with the Titans.
Yeah, I'd also take Chris Olave over 4.5 receptions in this game as well. Let's go to the Cardinals and the Commanders, John. We're seeing this one bet up to 7.5 at some shops. It's been holding at 7 at DraftKings. That's the number for Circa Million as well. It's a lot of points, man. It's a lot of points for the Commanders to cover. It does sound like as of Thursday evening, Terry McLaurin is trending toward playing, although you have to wonder, what percentage he will be at. Does he make it through this game? Do they risk, playing him a full snap load and potentially tweaking that injury? We will see. Regardless, the Commanders being 7-point favorites, there's only one team that could result in this line in week 1, and it's the Arizona Cardinals. And look, for as skeptical as I may be as of the Washington Commanders, I am very, very down on Arizona. We finally saw that win total number shrink in the last couple of weeks, down to 3.5. I don't know where the wins come, man. Maybe the Rams trip up and that could be a spot in division. They get them twice, but this is as bad of a roster top to bottom. And, starting with the quarterback, like as of 36 hours ago, we didn't even know who was going to be starting week 1 for this team. They're going to go with Josh Dobbs. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some Clayton Tune in this game as well. Uncomfortable number for me. I mean, if Washington was 6.5, no brainer. But this thing holding on at 7 is giving me a little bit of pause.
Yeah, understandable, because there's so much unknown on the Washington side of things too. How does Sam Howell look now that he's taking over as the starter? But I think the rest of that roster is pretty strong. I think the line's okay. I think the defense, particularly the front seven, is really strong, and the receiving core is fantastic. I think it's one of the more underrated units in football. I mean, I think almost regardless of McLaurin in this particular spot, they're still going to be able to have success through the air. In my opinion, I don't think that the Cardinals have a whole lot of pass rush juice. They just traded away Isaiah Simmons. They couldn't figure out what to do with Isaiah Simmons, a guy who is just like one of the more rare athlete prospects. I know that, sometimes if a guy doesn't have the requisite, football IQ or the right fit, but it feels like the Cardinals really messed that one up, especially getting a defensive coordinator in who is, famous for his ability to put the guys in the right spots in Philly. So the Cardinals, like you said, they're racing to the bottom, and there might not be much competition for them to hit that number one spot in the draft. 7 points is tricky, but I see this one as like a Washington 31, Arizona 7 type of game.
Yeah, I just don't know what the case for Arizona is on either side of the ball, right? It's not one of those teams where you're like, oh man, they have nothing on offense, but the defense is okay. It's like, no, the defense is terrible. The offense could be even worse. And I think you're right to point out that the Washington front seven is far and away the best like positional unit in this game. And, I think we could see, 5, 6, 7 sacks in week one, especially with an inexperienced quarterback who's just been on the team for essentially a month here. So yeah, if you could find an interceptions prop for Joshua Dobbs, which I'm trying to dig up as we speak, it is not listed at DraftKings. It's off the board.
Yeah,
so that's not a great sign.
Too hot.
Yeah, it's a little too hot. The books know. And on Sam Howell, one of the greatest preseasons of all time, right? I think we're required to always issue the disclaimer that, well, it is only the preseason, and for good measure, but he looked great. He looked really good. And, we'll need to see it in real live NFL games that matter. But that's a hell of a lot better than him, just looking shaky in the preseason. So I don't know. I'm trying not to take it too seriously, but I don't know how else you view it other than encouraging.
Yeah, and I like that he's had a year to kind of get himself acclimated. I like that he got to start a game at the end of last season. And I think, bottom line, when we look back at last year's draft class, I think we are going to wonder how Sam Howell fell so far behind the rest of the pack at that position, because, I mean, he was pretty dominant the entire time at North Carolina from the time he was a true freshman onward. His sophomore season was incredible. Junior year, some stumbling blocks, but I think that was more personnel related than Howell himself. So I think we have a pretty good player here. And now we have, again, like you said, a Washington team that has the best unit period playing in this game. And if there's, some semblance of competence from the quarterback position, not only does Washington cover here, but I think that people start to catch on by the end of September that this is a team that could challenge for a playoff spot.
Let's move on to Raiders-Broncos, one of several interdivision matchups in week one. The number is 3 at some books. It's 3.5 at others. I feel like I've seen mostly 3.5 over the last week. This is one that I initially said I'm staying away. I don't love either of these teams. There's too much variance, but you've kind of gradually talked me into the Denver side.
I do like Denver here. I think the Raiders, top to bottom, one of the worst rosters in football. I think that the Broncos, the famous stat that got memed into oblivion is if they were able to score 18.1 points per game last year, they I think would have made the postseason. They did not, so they did not. But that's why they hired Sean Payton to fix the mess. And I can't decide where I land on that. Is Russ is he redeemable? Is he able to recapture his previous form in Seattle? I know for a fact that it can't get worse than last year, especially with Peyton being there. I don't think that Raiders defense is going to be able to hold up over 60 minutes. You have Jimmy Garoppolo coming in, which I view as a slight downgrade from Carr. You lose Darren Waller this offseason. Outside of Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, who just showed back up, who scares you on the Raiders? I suppose Max Crosby, but I think that the Broncos know that very well and are going to do everything to load up and slow him down. And then you also have the Mile High in September. type of effect here where it's difficult for the road team to hang over the course of 60 minutes. So all things considered, as much as we wouldn't take the Broncos -3.5 last year, I think this is some semblance of a new leaf being turned over, and I think they take care of business here and get the cover at home.
This is another one where I think you kind of have to look at each individual unit. And I remain very skeptical that Russell Wilson ever comes close to being the player that he was 2 or 3 years ago. I think that's gone. I think we'll see a better version of him. I think Sean Payton will, kind of be pulling the puppet strings, certainly more than Nathaniel Hackett was. But I don't think that means that we all of a sudden just zap back to 2019 Russell Wilson. And I feel the same way about Deshaun Watson, by the way. I think maybe I feel a little more optimistic that could happen at some point, but I don't necessarily think it happens in week one. I just don't think the Raiders defense is any good. I think this is hot take there. I think this is a bottom 3 defense in the NFL. You add Tyree Wilson, we'll see what you get out of him, but that to me is a more of a developmental piece, not somebody who's going to make a major impact right away. And this was one of the worst secondaries, one of the worst linebacking cores in the NFL last season. They didn't really do a whole lot to address that. So even if I'm not that high on Denver, I think the Broncos can just play conservative here, lean on the run. And, again, I think this is a low scoring game. It's one of the lowest totals on the board. 44 is the number at DraftKings. I like the under on that. I don't know that either of these teams get to 20.
No, I don't think so either. You look at the Raiders depth chart, and it's so many high pick retreads that flamed out at their first stop in the NFL. And it's sort of like one of those things that rings hollow. Like the Falcons offensive line is all former first rounders, or the Ravens receiving core is all former first rounders. It's like, well, were they all like drafted by the same team? Mm-hmm. It can be a little bit overstated as far as the talent and the ability of some of these teams to successfully convert on these reclamation projects. So it's rough there in Vegas. And, on the other side of the coin, I think the Broncos have one of the best defenses in football. So I don't expect the Raiders to be able to really play catch up whatsoever. They'll be in a catch up script, but whether they execute or not, I'm dubious of that. So give me the Broncos at home, divisional opponent, new look offense.
Yep.
I'll take it.
Let's go to the Eagles at the Patriots. Eagles, you can find them as low as 3.5 point favorites at PointsBet. Most of the shops have them as a 4-point favorite on the road. Seeing a lot of Patriots love. I am yet to see really an explanation for why exactly the Patriots could win this game, let alone cover at home. Other than, everybody just kind of says, well, Bill Belichick, Jalen Hurts, he's never played a Bill Belichick defense before. And I get that argument. I think Bill Belichick has certainly befuddled a quarterback or two before. And this defense should be really good. Personnel wise, I think they're in good shape. I think they made the requisite coordinator changes that they needed to. Not having a defensive coordinator running your offense, for example, is a step in the right direction for the New England Patriots. But this Philly team is a wagon, man. And we can talk all we want about how great the Pats defense is. I think the Eagles is right there. I think personnel wise, I like it even more. And, offensively, these teams aren't even in the same stratosphere. So even if Philly stumbles early, even if Jalen Hurts goes 3 and out on his first 2 drives, like I just think, over the course of 4 quarters, this Philly team is just too talented.
You make some great points there, and it makes me feel queasy. But it's been stuck in my gut all week that the Patriots make this one close. They keep it to a field goal game. I don't see them winning. I don't like them as a money line upset or anything, but 4 points, which is where, like you said, you can get it at most places. I think New England can ugly this one up just enough, and I don't think offensively they're going to be doing a great job or lighting up the scoreboard by any means, but what I think that they should be able to do is just kind of like play possession, just try to like extend these drives, have these long clock chewing type of drives that result in field goals, maybe 1 or 2 touchdowns, so that like they're just kind of shrinking the pie on this game, limiting the amount of opportunities that Jalen Hurts and company have on the other side. And then hopefully, if you're betting the Patriots, that that defense is able to slow down the Eagles. The Eagles they're coming off losing the Super Bowl. That's never a great feeling. That's something that, is worth monitoring. Do they have any sort of lingering effects? I mean, I know that the core is still together and arguably even better after the draft that they had. But I do wonder if they may be a team that starts a little bit sluggish. And if that's the case, the Patriots under Bill Belichick, one of the last teams that you'd want to play under those circumstances. So it's going to be ugly, but I'm betting that this game is going to be ugly. And therefore, I think the Patriots keep it just close enough to cover this one. Does
that make you want to go under on the total here, sitting at 45?
Yes, definitely. I think that we're looking at, like a 24-21 type of game in favor of the Eagles. So it'll be close, but I like the under.
The Action Network had a great note on Mac Jones. He's 14-17-1 ATS in his career, but he's also 4-0 ATS against Zach Wilson. So if you take Zach Wilson out of the equation, he is 10-17-1 ATS against every other quarterback that he's faced. Meanwhile, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles were 7-0 straight up as a road favorite last season. Hurts, though, just 3-9 ATS as a road favorite. So taking care of business, but not always hitting that number. We'll agree to disagree on this one. I'm not backing off the Eagles. Let's go to the three games that we conspicuously skipped on the Sunday day slate. John, we kind of did a little subsection in our notes here. The toughest games to bet this week, and that is where we landed on Dolphins-Chargers, Packers-Bears, and 49ers-Steelers.
Yes. So I think 49ers-Steelers, the trickiness in that comes with how popular the Steelers have become in the market for this particular game. The Niners dealt with a lot of craziness that this offseason, a lot of it still yet to be resolved. We don't know what the deal with George Kittle is for this coming week, and they did get things sorted with Nick Bosa and everything. But Steelers are tough. You got Mike Tomlin at home. You got to feel like I definitely understand the rationale behind backing the Steelers here. It's 2.5. So, if it ends up being a field goal game, you might be kind of cooked there. So that there's some reason for concern, but mostly I do feel like the Steelers are the side in this one, but the Dolphins versus the Chargers game, make sense of it to me, please.
So we saw this matchup last year. And we thought we were going to get the shootout of all shootouts. The total was like 150, and neither team scored in the first quarter. Tua was 10 of 28 passing in that game. We saw the Chargers defense, really, they were so physical with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, kind of knocked them off their spot throughout the game. And, it's not like the LA offense looked out all that great either, but the Chargers ended up winning that game. I'm going to zag on this one. I think we get a shootout, right? And, the total's at 51, so maybe that's not a zag. I'm zagging away from what happened last year. I think in week one, both of these defenses are going to be scrambling a little bit. You got a new offensive coordinator with the Chargers. I think Kellen Moore is going to want to put his stamp on this offense right away. And for me, as a holder of a Justin Herbert MVP ticket, this is where it starts, right? I don't want to see, 41-year-old Drew Brees, Justin Herbert, like we saw last year. I want to see Justin Herbert chucking the ball down the field. You have these big vertical capable receivers. You add Quentin Johnston to the mix. They have an underrated fantasy tight end who I really like, and Gerald Everett. I like the Chargers in this game. I wish the number was 2.5. I think it's a close game. Miami absolutely could keep up with the Chargers, but even for week one, it's a long road trip all the way out there to the West Coast. Not a great home field advantage, of course, for the LA Chargers, but you'd rather be playing here than you would all the way down in Miami. So these are two just super, super evenly matched teams. I think they mirror each other in a lot of ways. The one big question I have about the Chargers, though, is have they made any attempt to finally fix the run game? Because that has been like the one thing you could depend on with this team over the last couple of years. We could talk about how fun the offense is and how great Herbert is all we want, but year over year, this team just cannot stop the run.
Yeah, and the linebacking core and the interior spine of that defense is suspect. Is Miami the team that makes them pay for it? Not necessarily. It could come in the form of big plays. I think that's sort of the theory that Miami's testing. They don't really have your traditional workhorse, and then Jeff Wilson gets hurt, of course. But with A-Chain and Mostert, if the Chargers are not gap sound, that's a long touchdown right there. So that's definitely a concern when it comes to the Chargers. I'm leaning with the Dolphins here, but I don't feel great about it. Like, if I was in your shoes and in the circuit contest, I would not be putting the Dolphins on there. Obviously, you're on the side of the Chargers anyway. But this game period, I think, is one of the trickiest, if not the trickiest game to find your side on for this weekend. And that's reflected pretty well in how the markets are viewing it too, where 55% of the money is on Miami covering, and 58% of the tickets are on them covering. And that's a narrower spread across both the money and the betting volume than pretty much any other game out there this week. So that goes to show just how split everyone is on this. And I can understand the rationale for the Chargers, but I'm feeling the rationale for the Fins just a little bit more.
I can assure you we'll go sicko mode at some point throughout the season, probably many points in the circa million, but that's a sicko mode pick if you're going with either of these teams in week one. I think we have some better options to parse through, but that was a good breakdown. Player prop wise, you're getting this at plus 165 at DraftKings. Give me Justin Herbert over 2.5 touchdown passes in this game. It's a high number. Most quarterbacks are sitting at 1.5 this week. I love it. Like I said, I'm holding the MVP ticket. I need him to probably get close to 40 touchdowns for that to have any chance. And I think it can happen this week. I think they're going to have to keep up with that Miami offense. So as far as value goes, it's a bit of a risk, but Justin Herbert to throw at least 3 touchdowns in this game, plus 165. Let's go to Packers-Bears, John. Really, really tough game to handicap. I was starting to talk myself into Green Bay. This is another one where you're going to want to line shop. They're down to a half-point dog over at PointsBet. The number's at 1.5 at FanDuel. It was at 1 earlier today, but I think we have pretty significant concerns right now, John, that Green Bay could be without not only Romeo Doubs but also Christian Watson.
Exactly. So that's important. Like one of those guys in a vacuum, you still feel okay about the Packers' ability to hang here, but when you start really having to dip into the depth well in this Green Bay receiving core, things get pretty ugly in a hurry. Like in Christian Watson, I think in and of himself is like a little bit of a dubious wide receiver one, at least based on what we know at this point. I think that maybe he develops into that, but missing him and the speed dynamic that he brings, that allows the Bears to kind of play up a little bit more. You're not so worried about getting beat over the top. I'm not sure that Jaden Reed offers that speed. Dontavian Wicks was a big play guy in college, but I'm not even sure he's going to be active in this game.
I think he might be, John, because if Watson and Dobbs aren't playing, there's only 4 other receivers on the depth chart. It's Jaden Reed, it's Malik Heath, it's Dontavian Wicks. Those are 3 rookies. And then, the sturdy veteran presence here, Samori Toure.
Yep, 7th rounder from last year. So that is a mess. If for your DFS folks out there, maybe Luke Musgrave is the play this week, or Aaron Jones. But for betting purposes, yeah, I'm concerned about the Packers. I mean, I felt like all along Jordan Love was going to need some help to really hit his final form, and it's not going to be there. The Bears, I don't think that their defense is necessarily fixed either, but I don't know if it's going to get tested enough here for it to really matter. And I think that offense, I love that DJ Moore addition. I think the offensive line is coming together a little bit. I think Justin Fields takes another step forward this year. So I was very, very much like you earlier this week. Is like, why not the Packers? We were the Bears, but and it's not just 2 receivers missing here. It's just thinking about how the flow of this game is going to go a little bit more in depth. And this could be something where Justin Fields, if he's running for 100 yards and then throws for another 200 and 2 touchdowns, that ends up being such a significant sample against this Packers defense, and it's just going to be tough for Green Bay to have enough possessions to catch back up.
Yeah, I'm not a believer in the Packers defensive coordinator, specifically Joe Barry, but did do okay against Justin Fields last season. I mean, this defense has seen Justin Fields 4 times over the last 2 seasons, so they should be relatively prepared for the unique challenges that he presents. And I want to say they held Chicago under 30 total points in those 2 games last season. So I think this could end up being a slog. I think Green Bay may ultimately have no choice but to really try to control this game on the ground. And maybe they were going to do that anyway, even if Watson and Dobbs were fully healthy. I'm looking at Aaron Jones rushing prop right now, John, 57.5. I love that because I think they might not have a choice but to just keep pounding him, even if it's not all that effective on a per carry basis. I think that's a really friendly number that could rise a few yards by the time we get to Sunday and we get confirmation that Dobbs and or Watson could be out. And for what it's worth here, I mean, Watson did not practice at all on Thursday. Romeo Doubs was able to get in some work. Matt LaFleur sounded a lot more optimistic about Dobbs than he did Watson as of today, but nothing certain at all whatsoever with either of those guys. I think they're both probably 50-50 at best. Let's get to Sunday night and Monday night real quickly. Then we'll talk Survivor, but we'll hand out our locks and we'll get the heck out of here. Cowboys-Giants is our Sunday night opener. Cowboys 3-point favorites at some shops, 3.5 at others. To me, this seems about right. I think Dallas is the vastly more talented team, no question about it. Giants, in a lot of ways felt like they overachieved last season. You still see a lot of Brian Daboll supporters. I am one of them. My question with the Giants is, did they do enough to remedy what was by far their biggest issue last year? They had no competent receivers on this team. And, rather than addressing receiver, they went out and got Darren Waller, which is kind of a roundabout way to address it. That certainly helps. That's a big, big plus for this offense. But I'm still pretty underwhelmed with Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, Paris Campbell, the rookie Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee. I just think, this Giants season could play out very similar to how last season went. And for at least the first half of last season, it felt like they caught every single break. I don't know that you could count on that happening again.
Right, exactly. As far as the help that they gave Daniel Jones outside of Darren Waller, you look at that receiver room and it's like, the Twitter meme, like they're having a mid-off. Like no one is a standout talent in that receiver room. And yeah, I mean, to your point, the Giants were like the testament of overachieving last year. I think the Vikings, like they're a more talented team, but our issues with them were separate. Like the Giants shouldn't have been winning those games, period. And they were finding ways with Brian Daboll. So like the Daboll versus McCarthy advantage, I think is something to consider here. But the Cowboys have, for the most part, owned the Giants over the last few seasons. And I do expect that to continue here. I think maybe the Giants regress a little bit. And I feel like the Cowboys, I don't know if this particular core is ever going to actually get it done as far as like winning the Super Bowl or even making the NFC Championship game. But for this particular game, in this instance, I feel like they're going to be able to come out, land some haymakers, and win this one by more than a field goal. So I'm on the Cowboys.
Let's go to Bills-Jets in the Monday night window. A banger of a matchup, John. I've publicly questioned on the XM show a number of times. Do the Detroit Lions deserve this big opening spot on Thursday night? But man, the schedule makers were in their bag with this Monday night game. Bills at the Jets. Bills 2.5-point favorites. That's held pretty steady over the last week. I found myself leaning Bills here. I know you are on team Bills regression this year.
Yeah,
I view the Bills similarly to the Minnesota Vikings. And obviously they're a better team than Minnesota, and Minnesota had more luck on its side last year than Buffalo did. But I think the Bills do take a step back. But to me, that's a team that won like 13 and a half games last year because of the DeMar Hamlin game. Could have been 13, could have been 14. I still think this is pretty easily an 11 or 12 win team. They're still one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the AFC. And, even if you maybe don't view them as a Super Bowl frontrunner in the conference as they were last year, I think there's a lot more certainty on this Bills roster than there is with the Jets.
There's certainly a lot more continuity. I will, that's absolutely true. But I'm of the belief that the Jets' big offseason experiment is going to work. And I think Rodgers is going to be able to hit the ground running. I think the connection with him and Garrett Wilson, I think that ends up being a big mismatch in favor of the Jets. Will be interesting to see, what that carry split looks like between Breece Hall and what Breece Hall looks like and Dalvin Cook. But either way, I am expecting the Jets to actually have some success on the ground here. I mean, I think the Bills, for being a team from Buffalo, lack some physicality, and I think that they're going to get rattled a little bit when the Jets go into bully ball mode a little bit. And then on the other side, I mean, this is a Jets defense that has given Josh Allen problems in the past. It yes. continues to get even better. So this is a nasty defense. In my mind's eye, I'm seeing a lot of flustered Josh Allen ripping off the chin straps after another 3 and out on Monday night. So give me the Jets here. I think they cover. I wouldn't mind sprinkling on the money line as well. I think that the Jets come out, make a statement in week one to the nationally televised audience that, this is a different gangrene than we've seen in the past.
That was a pretty strong case. And the number one thing that worries me is exactly what you said about last season, right? And, things don't always carry over, but Buffalo lost to a Mike White / Zach Wilson Jets team last year and, squeaked by the Jets again later in the season. And, at that point, Josh Allen was, significantly less than 100% dealing with the elbow injury. You can say whatever you want, but, they scored 17 and 20 points in 2 games against the New York Jets. And, you could get away with that when the other team has the worst quarterback in the NFL. But the level up from Zach Wilson / Chris Streveler / Mike White to Aaron Rodgers can't be overstated. So this is a really tough one for me. I can assure you it will not be on my Circa Million card in week one. I still have questions about the Jets offense. I don't have any questions about the defense. And, to me, it just becomes, okay, can either of these teams get to like 24 to 27 points? Because, I think if you can get there, you probably win this game. But I think it's easy to say, man, Garrett Wilson, he did all that with Zach Wilson. Now he gets Aaron Rodgers. Like, yeah, totally. I'm all in on that. Garrett Wilson could be a first team all pro. What about beyond him? Alan Lazard, Mecole Hardman, Randall Cobb. You have really no relevant tight ends to speak of. Tyler Conklin, Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook. We like that combination quite a bit, but I don't know that this Jets offense, like in terms of the receiving core, I don't know that it's all what is cracked up to be beyond Garrett Wilson. I think we just see that name and we don't really read beyond that.
That's true. That has been a bit of a blind spot, and doing as many best ball drafts as we do, it is interesting to see like the sheer like split between Garrett Wilson being a late first round pick, and then you don't see another Jets receiver come off the board until like when Aaron Rodgers did it at like pick 120, somewhere around there. So that goes to show the kind of discrepancy, the fall off in talent from number 1 to number 2 there. And, we've seen Lazard and Mecole Hardman both be a little bit dinged up this week. It looks like they were both full goes on Thursday, so they should be set there. Mecole is someone that you can't really build your offense around. He's good for a splash player too. So I'm interested to see if they test that against one of the non-Tre'Davious White corners for Buffalo. And Lazard, I mean, you've seen probably more of Allen Lazard than almost anybody at this stage. So that he's a fine enough talent. He's a good presence to have out there because he's a big body, can help in the run game. But yeah, he's not really a game breaker, and they don't really have game breakers in the tight end room either. So that's a fair critique on what the ceiling of this Jets offense can be. But, Rodgers has transcended some not so great setups offensively before, and I think he's going to be fired up. I think his ayahuasca journeys into the darkness over the offseason. Here we go. I think that they are going to help him just be tremendous on Monday night.
We talk about guys like, Percy Harvin and Jahmyr Gibbs is like, well, he's like part receiver, part running back. Allen Lazard is like a hybrid receiver left tackle. That's my take on him. He's a better blocker than he is a pass catcher. Would you take Aaron Rodgers to throw at least 2 touchdowns in this game at plus 130?
I would. I absolutely would. I think we're gonna get there by hook or by crook. One's gonna go to Garrett Wilson, and one is gonna be a splash play to one of those depth receivers.
Okay, there we go. And look, we know if it's first and goal at the 2-yard line, you're getting at least one slant or one fade to Garrett Wilson before they try to run the ball. That has been borne out year over year.
Yeah, that was in his contract, I believe, one of the stipulations. If we're in close, you got to let me try once.
Yep. All right, let's talk a little Survivor here. By the way, we are running both Survivor and Pick'em contests each week, starting this week over at Splash Sports. They've got a partnership
check them
going
out.
on.
Beat us in there. We're in.
Absolutely. Please, for the love of God, I dare you to beat us. I joined the Survivor contest. I know you're in both of these. It's been a great partnership at RotoWire with Splash Sports. You can go to rotowire.com/splash. That's SPLASH. Get in on these contests. A lot of money being put up by Splash. I think entries are only $10, but you can win significantly more. So go join those RotoWire Survivor and Pick'em contests. A bunch of our experts, a bunch of our writers will be in both of those this season. John, I have my Survivor teams tiered off into 3 separate groups here. Teams that I feel great about, teams that I feel a little less great about, and then what I've labeled the sicko tier. If you really want to go against, I think, what the crowd is going to do. Tier 1, I have the Washington Commanders, and I have the Baltimore Ravens. And as a reminder, if you're new to Survivor, Spreads are not involved here. The team just has to win outright. Tier 2, I have the Minnesota Vikings and the Seattle Seahawks. And in the sicko tier, I have the Atlanta Falcons and the Philadelphia Eagles.
Well, I'm definitely with you on that first tier. And I think the first tier is fascinating because on one side, you have an established good team in Baltimore, a team that makes the postseason more often than not, playing against Houston. But the question is, do you want to save them for a little bit further down the road? Because therein lies some of the strategy when it comes to Survivor. But if you get too cute, that obviously can come back to burn you. And, you just need to go 1-0 every single week. And so saving teams, that it's a whole other, we could do like an entire podcast on the merits of that thought process. But, Washington, as we talked about during our breakdown of that game, it's just like, okay, maybe we don't love Washington. Maybe we think they can be a sneaky competitive team over the course of the season. It just all comes down on Arizona. And I forgot to mention this earlier, and maybe this is just because I grew up in the DC area. A lot of my friends are Washington fans. The enthusiasm around that team now with Dan Snyder being gone and this being the first game at FedEx Field sans Dan, I feel like there might actually be some semblance of like an electric crowd in Washington, which I thought was borderline impossible, but I definitely see the merits of going Washington here, saving Baltimore for another week. But I also understand that the consternation of riding with a team that's not as established as Baltimore.
Yeah, could this be like a falling of the Berlin Wall situation? Is that what we're getting at? Like it's just this black cloud being lifted in Washington. I think you're right, man. And look, like you said, it depends how deep you want to go on this. If you're playing in a contest like Circus Survivor, Thanksgiving counts as its own week, Christmas counts as its own week. Like you really have to kind of map things out the deeper that you get. But you're not going to find a better spot to use Washington. And it's by no means a lock. I'd feel a lot better if your goal is just to get to week 2 and figure it out from there, then use the Baltimore Ravens. But if you're really kind of picking the matchups and trying to map out your first 4, 5, 6 weeks, you think you're going to be in it for the long haul. There's not going to be a better spot for Washington all year. Getting the Arizona Cardinals week 1 at home, the post Dan Snyder party, that would be my very simple case for using the Commanders.
Yeah, to continue the Cold War analogy, it'll be like the McDonald's opening up in St. Petersburg and everyone going nuts.
I also forgot Jacksonville here. Like, where would you throw Jacksonville? Would they be tier 1, tier 2 for you?
They would be tier 2 because they're on the road. But I still I still view them as a viable survivor pick this week, and I think Seattle is right there as well. I think with what I was saying about this Vikings game could get a little weird. Nothing really based in hard science, but I feel like Tampa Bay might give the Minnesota backers in Survivor just a little bit more of a sweat than they would like.
Mm-hmm. All right, John, I have one quick parlay to throw out, then we will get to our locks of the week. We'll throw out at least one parlay per week here. We'll start getting into some teasers as well. Had a lot of fun with those last season. We're going to go with some games and some teams that we've already talked about here. We know that we're both on the right side. I'm taking the Jags money line. All they got to do is win in Indy. We're going to pair that with the Seattle Seahawks money line, not messing around with the spread in either of these games. And we are going to tether both of those to the under 45 in Eagles-Patriots. You've sold me 100% on that one. That gets you to plus 286 at the DraftKings Sportsbook. So that is our parlay of the week for week 1. John, give me your lock of the week. Which game against the spread? What's your favorite pick on the entire slate?
Stamp it. I do love that teaser you just threw out, or the parlay you just threw out. But for me, my lock of the week, am I placating my co-host here? Perhaps.
I like where this is going.
Do I believe it in my deepest soul? I do. Give me the Jags minus 4.5. Take it to the bank. I love the Jags this week. I think they're going to make mincemeat of Indianapolis, and you can still get them at 4.5 at FanDuel. Sign me up. Give me the Jags.
I love it. I love a little mincemeat reference. Just a phrase that I've really never fully understood, but I just love how it sounds. I'm going to go with the Seattle Seahawks. Not a whole lot else to say there. You can get them as low as 4 at FanDuel right now. That makes me feel even better. When I wrote this pick down, it was 5.5. So I'm getting 1.5 points here that I did not expect to get. I think Seattle wins this game pretty easily out on the West Coast. John, that'll wrap it up for us, man. Like I said, we'll be back every single week of the season, all the way through the Super Bowl. We'll mix in some guests as the season progresses. We'll be kind of keeping the same format, try to hit on every single game, give at least a thought or two on where we're leaning. We'll mix in some more player props as well as the year goes along. But we appreciate everybody who's joined us live, whether you're watching on Facebook, on our Twitter account, on YouTube. You can find this, of course, in the RotoWire Fantasy Football podcast feed. And John, I've saved the best for last. This time next week, you and we will be together watching Vikings-Eagles Thursday Night Football, baby. I cannot wait.
Oh my God, that game better be better than the one from the Monday night doubleheader last year. But other than that, vibes are going to be immaculate. We will be coming to you from an undisclosed location, and we will not be podcasting.